Nearly $4 million dropped in salary in the latest NYCFC roster move, technical staff announcements, and the MLS Cup playoffs. That and more coming up on NYCFC Views.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. NYCFC Views.
Collins approaches the shot, and New York City wins the first MLS Cup on their first try, and they're going crazy.
Tiene tiro y gol! New York City es el campeón de Major League Soccer.
The sickest New York City FC podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Here we are, not preparing for a playoff game. It's, I think, our earliest off-season discussion that we've had since 2015. I'm Glenn Crooks, Roberto Abramowitz, your NYCFC radio commentators here on NYCFC Views. Roberto, what's happening? How's your week going? How you doing?
It's going fine. I got over a cold. I am feeling better, much better right now. Got a good night's sleep. Have a good cup of coffee with me. I mean, it's a good morning. The sun is shining, and we're not in Montreal where it snowed. Sorry, Juliana.
Yeah, Juliana, our producer today, my good friend Marco Masucci sent me a photo yesterday cleaning off his windshield. Montreal's it's a different place. I tell you, January and February, we think we know cold here in the metropolitan area. No, we do not. And by the way, coffee mug. This is Mexican born. This mug.
It is. It looks beautiful, by the way. Yeah. And I get the transparent one. That's it's supposed to keep it warmer.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. New York City FC. Before we get to the technical staff and Nick Cushing, who's under contract, will be the coach next year. David Lee, who's under contract, will be the sporting director next year. We'll chat about that a little bit, perhaps. But the roster moves were announced just yesterday. And I think we, on our little text thread between you, myself, your broadcast partner, Ariel Hudas, and mine, Maddie Lawrence, we didn't think there were really any surprises on here. I did mention at the top, a lot of money has been dropped, especially with the departures of Matias Pellegrini and Alfredo Morales. And those are two different stories there. But just to go through it, in addition to those, and Brian Cufré, it's Nico Benalcazar, Brian Cufré, Jonathan Jimenez, Alfredo Morales, Samuel Owusu, Matias Pellegrini, and Stephen Turnbull, where the club declined the options of those seven, exercising the options of Luis Barraza, Matt Freese, the two goalkeepers, Andres Jason, Kevin O'Toole, and Gabe Siegel, who is in the Middle East on loan, where he's played very little. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. What was your initial thoughts about the roster moves, Roberto?
No real surprises. I mean, at all. I mean, I can understand you can make a good argument for every one of these guys that was dropped. Maybe a little bit surprised with Cufré because he only got a year over here. But then again, he's been supplanted in the starting lineup. He wasn't as consistent as they wanted him to be, especially on the defensive side. So he winds up being sacrificed. We didn't get to see anything of Jonathan Jimenez, who basically played with NYCFC 2. Same thing goes for Samuel Owusu. Pellegrini underperformed, especially for the size of his contract. And for as much of a great leader that he is. And, there was a lot of talk, especially from the coaching staff, about how good he was in the locker room. He just never seemed to be able to equal that on the field. And look, at the end of the day, you basically have to perform, especially if you're getting over $1 million a year. And Stephen Turnbull, once, Mitja Ilinic showed up, I mean, his time playing basically disappeared, and he wound up going to NYCFC 2. So no real surprises.
Well, no, that's you have that a little backwards. He was NYCFC 2 all last year, and then due to injuries to both Gray and Ilinic, he was brought on and signed to the first team. There's some exceptional clause in there where he could be signed, but then he couldn't go back to the 2 team. And I think I have that right. But he, they had to. There was a point where they had to either sign him or release him. And
Right.
I had some communication with Steven, and I just asked him, what his next move might be, and he said he's not sure yet. He's getting together with his agent, and they're going to, he said he's going to have to be patient, but I think there'll be something out there for him. A two-way player, and one of the, it was interesting because he could kind of do what Ilinic did, but probably not quite to that level. And he could defend like Gray, although not to that level.
Exactly.
He could really do both, and that's one of the reasons he played. If I'm not mistaken, he played in 1 or 2 matches where Ilinic was back healthy, or Gray, because he was doing pretty well.
He was. He was a little bit of a hybrid of both of them, but not as good at both as what they do best. So Ilinic attacking and Gray defending. And he needs to work on his offensive game, especially on his crosses. I remember, the thing that stands out is the opportunities that he was able to create by getting down the wing and doing and then just not being able to put a good cross in the box. So, that's something that he can still work at and improve at. And I hope he gets another chance and he succeeds. And he has a great career here on end. This isn't an end. It's just a new beginning someplace else.
And I did reach out to Gabe Siegel as well, mostly because I don't know exactly what's happening, but he was loaned to Tel Aviv. And we understand there's massive issues right now in that part of the world. And but he is on loan there through June of 24. And then, does he show something so that he can get back into the mix with New York City FC? You wonder what will happen there. Haven't really been able to talk to anybody in the club specifically about these guys. Sometimes we'll get an indication as to whether they're, going to be brought back or looked at closely. But Gabe has only played 3 matches for a total of 34 minutes for Tel Aviv. So far, not so good for him as far as trying to, maybe show something.
No, without a doubt. I mean, he's in a tough position, and obviously over there, the only thing you worry about is his safety and everybody's safety down there. So, and hopefully, things normalize, war ends, and people can get back to their lives. Just terrific. I can't even think about it.
Yeah, it's difficult. I do want to mention Alfredo Morales, how vital, I think at times we've thought maybe, a guy's making over 620 grand. I mean, he's on a good salary, and perhaps he didn't perform to the level as expected, but I don't see it that way, because I just go back to the MLS Cup winning year. And even though he didn't really become a regular along the way until Parks got injured. But once Parks went down, Morales became the permanent structure there, and he played all but 1 minute in the MLS Cup playoffs that year, Roberto. So, for whatever, and he's suffered numerous injuries that have kept him out. So for whatever anybody thinks about what he's accomplished in his time in New York City, I think without him, they may well not have won MLS Cup. So that's what
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, it was sort of hard for him to break in as a regular starter when you have Parks and Sands, when both of those guys are just really, really good. Obviously, Sands left and he had an opportunity, but then he was hurt. And so then Hack came in and performed very well there as well. And now Sands is back. Now with Sands back, and you've got Sands and Parks again, it became difficult for him to be able to break in. I remember they tried him on defense, central defense. That exactly wasn't his thing. But I think you make a great point of how important he was in that year where New York City made that run towards the end. And then, after that Atlanta game with Goody Torrance's goal all the way through. And he was a huge part of that. And probably without him, New York City doesn't win that championship.
And I think the most disappointing player on the roster this year for me, Roberto, and wonderful guy, and you probably spoke to him a little bit more because his English is limited, was Brian Coufret, who came in on a massive contract with massive expectations. Granted, he's a young boy, but and I mentioned it last week, if there was one thing that disappointed me, as you look and you're trying to evaluate the coaching staff and the players and how everything progressed, is his inability to improve during the course of the year, and losing out to Kevin O'Toole, which is no insult, but it's a college graduate acquired through the draft, and versus another guy who transfers in when you have these expectations that he's going to bring you to another level. So, people can say whatever they want about Tyler Magno and those sorts of things, but I think Kufre lists for me number one on the disappointment scale. Playing wise,
he lost his job twice this year.
Yeah.
And part of it, he couldn't seem to play 90 minutes. Remember at the beginning of the season, he couldn't get through 60 and they would take him out of the game.
Yeah.
And I think you see the potential there. And he scored some important goals. And I remember there was one game in particular, and I don't remember which game it was, where New York City desperately needed a goal. And he just basically bombed forward the entire time. He was almost a center forward. And you wish that was the guy that you got throughout the season all year long. And you didn't.
Yeah. No, you saw flashes, no question.
Without a doubt. So it's massively disappointing that, again, New York City's got to go back and look for another starting left back. And it's been a while. They've how many guys have they tried there in that position already? Between him, O'Toole, Odmanson, the guy I just mentioned, Tararenson, Matarrita. The list goes on and on and on. And they still haven't been able to find somebody to lock that position down.
It's almost like the number of quarterbacks the Jets have had over the years, sort of that trying to find the right quarterback. All right. Every podcast, I'm going to get New Jersey and the Jets both into every podcast, Roberto. All right.
And I'm the one who works for the Jets, not you. Fine.
So there'll be a lot more to be said about the roster and the needs. Right now, only 2 central defenders on the roster. So that's an area too. But let's get to the technical staff. We mentioned Nick Cushing and David Lee, and there was a post put out by the club, which, look, they're both under contract. So it's not like the club's going to say, hey, they're coming back. No, they're under contract. But because of the hashtag Cushing out, hashtag Lee out, and all the negativity, which, we believe is a minority of the supporters, being that fervent in their dislike for these two and the fact that they need to be out. We get stuff said to both of us online pretty consistently because we've been supportive of Nick. But they're going to be here in 2024. So if you want to be angry, go ahead and be angry. But that's what's going to be. What you need to do is put your positive energy towards the group. And we know that Marty Edelman, chairman, who put this announcement out, said they're going to get the players to become a better team in 2024. Because
that said a lot. To me, that was the most important thing, because to me, that's an admission that they didn't do enough this year.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the deficiencies that the roster has had, the fact that they didn't have a center forward for most of the year, that they tried to convert Tyler. It didn't work the same way that it worked with Castellanos. So, and they didn't really, have a plan B. Aside from Gabe Siegel, which, with all respect to Gabe Siegel, wasn't really the answer, although he did score a couple of really important goals for New York City. So, they lowered the budget, they lowered the player budget, and New York City was around 15, 16, which put them somewhere in mid-range as far as where, the teams are. It wasn't Colorado, it wasn't the Red Bulls, but it wasn't exactly Toronto or Inter Miami either. So they said that they're going to support them, and the way that they phrased it, it just seems to say, hey, yeah, we didn't support them as much as we probably should have this year, and we're going to fix that for next year. That's the way I read it. I don't know how you read it.
No, I think that's as clear as you could put it, for sure. And I think it was important for the club to put something out there. So whether the supporters, the ones that are against Nick, and the ones that are 4. Either way, it matters little right now because he's back guiding the team in 24, as is David Lee as the sporting director. Now, a couple of technical positions, technical staff positions. One announcement, well, it hasn't come from the club, but it was put out there that Kleberson will not be with the club. And Juan Carlos broke the news. And
Yes.
Kleberson was with the Philadelphia Union, was with their academy, and he moved over to New York City FC because he thought he would have, and he told me this in an interview, and we're going to play a clip here in a moment, told me that he moved to New York City FC because you didn't have to read too deeply between the lines, is that, he felt that maybe he would have more of a contribution in terms of training preparation and match game management. And indeed he did. But he was also brought over because there were 5 Brazilians, 4 of whom who didn't speak much English on the side, or if any English. And Kleberson, and we've seen it in training during the course of our time with the likes of Magno and Thiago and Pereira, Kleberson would be standing right next to them in training and pretty much translating what Nick Cushing had to say to them so that they understood what they were trying to get out of a certain moment. Not all the time, but we saw it enough to know how important he was.
For sure. And now they're down to Magno. He's the only Brazilian player, or Portuguese-speaking player that they have. Well, actually, that's not true. Him and Martins.
Martins, yeah.
Right. But I keep on thinking Martins more of a mentor than anything else. So,
and he speaks English.
Yeah, so they've got Martins to take care of Magno, basically.
Well, but he speaks English. So,
Yeah, and he speaks English, he speaks Spanish, he speaks Japanese, although I don't think that's going to come into play.
Probably not. So the Kleberson interview. So Roberto, I sat down with Kleberson after I was very privileged to be able to go to Qatar. Thank you to SiriusXM and United Soccer Coaches and New York Post Digital and NewJersey.com, so I could go and cover this thing. But on the flight back, I noticed that Qatar Airways or Airlines, they had this collection of full World Cup games, including 2002. And I knew Kleberson, played in that game. Brazil ended up beating Germany 2-0. So I watched the full match, and it was so interesting. I've never really focused on him like that as a player before, and how good he was. And then learning that he actually was put in a different role that game to get more forward and be involved in the attack. Ronaldo scored both goals, but Kleberson set up both of them as well. Didn't get assists on both maybe, but he was involved in both of them, getting closer to the goal. But what was really interesting, Roberto, is that he was on a bench for the first World Cup game, and by the time the final came around, he was like, they had to have him on the pitch. But this clip I'm going to play, I thought was pretty funny. When he got first with the national team, he's got Ronaldo and Ronaldinho, 2 guys that like to have the ball, and here's what he had to say about that.
A lot of Ronaldo, because Ronaldo, even like the guys get one time with a picture of me and Ronaldo when we really close, we have a head-to-head really close, because he come to me one time and say, he called me like a Zeca. He's a Zeca Pagodinho. That's the guys in Brazil, like a musician guy. And then he called me, hey, every ball you have, try to find me, okay? Don't worry. Receive the ball, try to find me. I can make the game for us, right? Just do this, kid. I say, okay, perfect. And then every time when I have the ball, I try to get him. But Ronaldinho's come and say the same. Every ball you grab, pass the ball to me. And Ronaldo's the same. I say, oh my God, who should I pass the ball?
So you have to balance it then, huh?
I have to balance, you know what I mean? And that's also when I receive the ball, I'm glad those 2 play in the front of me. Right. Because it's more easy for me, because I just like a receiver, put my hands up, I say, whoa, Ronaldo's a better situation, play ball to him. Oh, Ronaldinho's a better one. Because Ronaldo always tries to get away from the defender to receive the ball in 1v1 and go to the goal. Ronaldinho won the ball in a tight space because he wanted to do the magic, dribble everyone, and that's different. That's making it more easy to me to play, you know what I mean?
How cool is that? I mean, I sat with him for about a half hour, but So they
That's
both
great.
said,
I mean, can you imagine you playing the ball to Ronaldinho and then getting stared down by Ronaldo, and then you play it to Ronaldo and then getting stared down by Ronaldinho? There's no winning in that situation, by the way. You
well, but
always lose.
look how smart he was, though. He knew what each one of them wanted, so he'd pick out the situation. So imagine you have the responsibility of, like, he was kind of a low-lying defensive midfielder, winning the ball and getting it forward. So not only did he have that response, then he had to figure out where these guys were and who was in the best position to play. But that's how valuable he was. He was valuable to the coaching staff here at New York City FC. I know that, and he will no longer be with the staff. So it's unfortunate. Great guy too. If we saw him, he was always had a smile.
Without a doubt, really great. Always had a smile, no matter the situation. Always being positive and looking forward. He'll definitely be missed around here. If we get a chance to speak to him to see what his future plans are, we'll obviously share them here.
Yeah, and one final little story is where I get my hair cut. The woman who owns it her name's Lily. The woman who owns it is named Lily. Her son cuts my hair, Frankie. But Lily is from Rio de Janeiro, and Frankie told me, he goes, "Oh, my mother loves Cleberson." So I went into the training facility, and sure enough, eventually I got this autographed photo of Cleberson, which I presented to her, and I have pictures of it. I probably should have posted that at some point, but I did post it, but I could have shown it here. But nonetheless, Cleberson was the most requested autograph at New York City FC in 2023. How about that? An assistant coach who you don't really hear much about. And that's how widely popular this guy is and what he meant to the Brazilian group. Crazy.
I mean, he's a legitimate superstar. I mean, he really is. He's a legitimate World Cup winning superstar. And he, sort of laid low and unassuming here in Major League Soccer and contributed greatly for sure. And it doesn't surprise me that he was so requested.
And he told me, he said he loves being in America because he could take his family out to dinner. You hear these stories, but he said even now when he goes back, he can't have any peace when he goes to a department store or people still recognize him and just it must be nice to be that beloved. And then, but you also see the side of it where he's like, "Wow, at least I can have some peace in my life here too."
It's a different story. Did you see the picture this week of Messi going out to the park with his wife?
Yeah.
Did you see that picture?
I did.
And they're on a park bench. I think it's they're in a park bench and they're talking and they're smiling. Crazy. And all that. And in the next park bench, you see his bodyguard just making sure nobody comes near him. Even
dude is in every photo.
It's still there.
That dude is in every photo, in the upper corner, the lower corner. You always see him in the back over his shoulder. He is close.
Where's Waldo?
Yeah,
but except he's easy to find.
Which player was it? One of the players dressed up as one of the Inter Miami players dressed up as Messi's bodyguard for Halloween.
It was Robert Taylor, I believe.
Yeah, I think
it was Robert Taylor. It was great.
How great is that? There's a couple of other members of the technical staff who are also departing, but for good reasons. Daniel Fradley is the head of performance analysis, and he's going to take that same position within the CFG group. So there's 13 satellite teams under the City Football Group auspices, and Fradley in essence is going to be in charge of all those teams and keeping track of that. So congratulations to him because it's a wonderful promotion. And then Kevin Tosti, who we also got to know, was his assistant, was the second in command with the performance analysis. He's going full-time with the U.S. men's national team, Greg Berhalter, which is wonderful. So two guys that were very...
in Hartford. I saw him in Hartford before the last game of the season. And, I saw him there and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he was telling me that he had just taken the job and that when New York City seasons ends, that would be his last game and all that. I'm really happy for him. I mean, that's a really massive jump as well to be with a national team, especially coming into, with all the, amazing, tournaments that are coming up between Copa America, The qualification to
World Cup.
Copa America, which comes up, Copa America, which hopefully they make. Then you go and you have, can you imagine they're not making Copa America? Can you
And
imagine
especially,
that?
can you imagine not making Copa America and Trinidad keeping you from going there? It'd be another
Again.
Trinidad story, yeah.
Again, and then I mean, there's Gold Cup, and then after that, there's the World Cup. So, boy, it's massive. It's really happy for him. A really nice guy.
And
so
I think it's
both
important.
of them, and Bradley as well.
It's important to note too, Roberto, that these are vital positions within the organization. I know they're going to look inside first, but it's Bradley. Just to be clear, he's been there almost since the very first day of the franchise. So, you know, we talk about people that are vital. I talked about Morales, you know, how important he was to MLS Cup. Well, Bradley was as well. You know, Ronnie Dyla leaned on him, and then Nick Cushing really leaned on him too. He was on the grass. He was in the midst of training as well. So it's an important position to fill, both of them, to be sure. And New York City, Roberto, I don't know if you're aware of this. I think we must have talked about it. They're training until November the 17th, and that's in the collective bargaining agreement. Players, whether they get eliminated or not, they have to they train until November the 17th. So they're up there in Orangeburg doing something. We haven't seen it, but they are up
invited.
There. No,
we haven't asked for an invitation either. But let's be fair.
Well, actually, I have, and I'm still waiting because I understand they were going to have a couple of scrimmages. So I'd like to go up and watch a scrimmage, but we'll see.
I'd like to too. What are we going to do? If you find out, let me know.
We'll give it a shot. All right, Roberto, let's kick it around. What do you say? An extension of the first segment, if you don't mind, Roberto. But this is kicking it around. It doesn't apply to current NYCFC players. Tati Cassiano started for Lazio yesterday and played 78 minutes. Or on was it yesterday or on what's today? I don't even know what today is. Anyway, forget what I just said. On Sunday, he got one shot. It was on goal. Then Immobile came in for him and ended up converting a penalty in 90 minutes plus 5, fifth minute of stoppage time, and Lazio beat Fiorentina 1-0. Fiorentina, Rocco Camiso's club, and there's a battle. They have a battle for this Europa Conference League. Like whoever finishes 6th in Serie A, right now Fiorentina is there on 17 points. Lazio then is 7th with 16 points. So it was a big win.
Absolutely, I'm glad to see that Tati's getting some minutes, and he's gone up as far as the quality of the team, maybe not necessarily the quality of the league, because I think that Spain and Italy are pretty much equal. So, but it is very different, and the defending is different and all that. And here's hoping that he's going to be able to break out. What does he have? 1 goal this season so far?
I think that's right. But getting a start in a what was a very important match does have a lot of meaning. And then before we get to MLS Cup playoffs, I want to tell a brief story about Fred Briand. Now, Fred Briand, we know as the first couple of years of the franchise, Fred Briand was a starting central defender for New York City FC. And he's now an assistant coach at DC United, although he's in limbo because Wayne Rooney left. New general manager has not been hired, and they're not going to name a coach until that happens. So Fred's not sure what's going to happen. But I had him on my show recently on Sirius XM called The Coaching Academy. And I asked him the question, was he surprised that Rooney resigned right after DC United defeated New York City FC on decision day 2-0? It was DC United's decision.
Their decision day.
Yeah. And it's the result really that prevented New York City from getting into the playoffs. And here's a clip from my interview. He said he wasn't surprised about that, but he was surprised that Rooney didn't bring him along. Listen.
I was surprised in terms of my situation because all the time he said to me, if I'm leaving, you are with me. You are doing my job. You know the way I work, and I trust who you are. And so I say, we never know. We're going to see, So he left without asking me if I wanted to go with him. So I was a little bit surprised. to be fair. But I heard after a few days that the club in Birmingham wanted big name, and I don't have a big name in in England, so it is what it is. For me, it's you don't need to push or force things. Maybe it's a destiny. There is no regret. I wish them the best, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
That is unfortunate, because isn't Wayne Rooney's name big enough? You need a big name assistant. You know what I mean? I don't know about that. I don't know if I would buy that reasoning, Fred, but I know you. You'll just take it in stride and now move on to your next adventure. Yeah, so what a bunch of malarkey, right? What a bunch of malarkey.
I don't know. Maybe they did tell him that. I mean, just like
No,
I
I'm sure
can just imagine the arrogance saying, "Who's this Briant guy?" No, you need somebody, local, important local, and that. And I don't. I can get that. I mean, obviously, if Rooney really wanted to say, like, I'm not going to take the job unless I can bring Briant along.
You just answered it.
Are they going to say, well, don't take the job?
No, they're not. If he told the guy he's bringing him along, you bring him along. Wayne Rooney goes in and said, this guy's got to be with me. He's worked with me last year. We need him. That's all that's got to be said. And we're talking Birmingham City. Here's Wayne Rooney after a recent result. So as I put up on Twitter, he's worked miracles since he's got there. The coach who was fired before him, sacked, had won 2 in a row, and Birmingham City was in 6th place in the championship. Rooney is 0-3. And now they've dropped to 14th in the championship. So there he is, scratching his head, trying to figure it all out. Who knows if Briant was there?
It takes time, though, right? I mean, we've seen this. It takes time to adapt to a new team. And, I mean, I don't know how much he was following them before the fact that he wound up taking the job and what he knew about them. But, I mean, just like any place else. I mean, sometimes you win your first game and everything's really exciting. But we understand it really takes a few weeks, at least 5-6 games before you get the whole general sense of what you should be doing when you're a manager.
So you don't get the gist of anything I'm doing here. I'm hammering the guy. I know
you are. I'm just being the voice of reason, as I always have to be here.
Right. Oh, the voice of reason. He screwed over Fred Brilliant, but you're the voice of reason. All right, let's get to these playoffs.
Fred, sorry, I agree with you.
MLS playoffs. I don't know how many times you did this, Roberto, but it happened several times to me where I didn't watch every game in full. I've seen the highlights of all the games, and I've watched a couple of games. But when I would wake up and see the score, if I wasn't sure by the end of the night, I saw the score, and my immediate thought was that the team that lost was eliminated. And then I'd always have to come back and think, no, it's this ridiculous best of 3, which is getting hammered right and left by players, by certainly by journalists. This was from Front Office Sports. And we've heard criticism from every angle. And certainly the players are wondering, and look, the coaches have to be careful how they direct their criticism here. But I think we've heard it from enough people within clubs where the regular season is demeaned enough by having 9 playoff teams in each conference. Now you're taking it another level where FC Cincinnati wins the Supporters Shield, and they've got to go to Red Bull Arena to win a game in order to, to advance, or if they don't, then they got to go back home again and forced to a third game with the New York Red Bulls. So it's that's the reason I don't like it in particular. It really takes away from the regular. At least if you're seated above somebody, you're home for that game. Home field advantage means a lot for most teams, and that's what you deserve. That's what you deserve because
you do get a home game because the third game is being played back at your place.
No. One home game, period. Knockout, end of story.
I understand that. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to make sure that people understand that it's not like a 2-game series. They've got to go, and there's a third game. If Cincinnati loses at Red Bull Arena on Saturday, right? They play Saturday. If they lose, then they get another home game, back at TQL.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to win 3 games. They abandoned the best.
Look, I agree, but let's explain why this is happening, right? Apple spent $2.5 billion on rights over the next 10 years, $250 million a year. That's a minimum. If they sell a lot more advertising or there's more interest and they sell a lot more subscriptions, then that number goes up. It's not it's not a total number. It is the minimum number. All right. And so to be able to get the most out of this, they wanted more playoff games. And so they pushed, and obviously pushed hard enough, that MLS came up with expanding the playoffs to 9 teams, having a playing game, and then from there, that first round being best of 3. And so there's a lot more television inventory for Apple. And that is the main reason why this is happening. I mean, we were all very happy with the format that they had just before, right? The format that we had last year. That the 2 top teams in the conference rested rested for the first round. And then they joined in the second round, and there was, what was it? How many teams were there? 8, at that point?
7.
Or whatever it was, or 7.
7 times 2.
So, yeah. And so we were happy. I thought that format worked very well. It was very exciting.
Everybody liked it.
The Philadelphia Inquirer also hammered this and had a great article on it. And in the Philly Inquirer, go look for it. Go get a subscription at Philly. Because he covers the league very, very well and all of soccer, and that's pretty good. So, and he hammered it, and but the proof is going to be in the pudding. So far, the games have been very good, right? And
attendance.
People were wondering if that was going to happen. I know attendance hasn't been great. Yes, I know that, but is it all attendance? No, the most important thing to me is the quality of games and if they're going to be exciting. That's the most important. Obviously, attendance, you want to see all these games full and everything as rowdy as possible because that helps sell the sport and it makes things better. And to see, games that weren't sold out. Cincinnati wasn't sold out. They had 24,000 and change when their sellout is 25,513. I didn't see what the attendance numbers were for LAFC, but they were 22. Wide patches. Well, 20. They didn't. Well, there's a lot of no-shows there. I mean, in the thousands, and that we never see.
FC Cincinnati had a lot of no-shows also, but go ahead.
No, but they didn't sell out. If you're telling me that they have 22,000, 22,000 is a sellout at BMO Stadium.
Let's not talk about this anymore other than to say attendance was very poor for a playoff game pretty much across the board. You could look at
St. Louis sold out.
You could look at Houston also that had a really, they've struggled over the years with any game, whether it's a regular or and they I don't know what
17,000, which for them is almost good.
Yeah. So I think that's my point, is that's fan interest. That dictates fan interest when you don't show up for a playoff game. Why don't you show up for that playoff game? Because it's not a deciding game. You're going to come to the third game if necessary, because now it's for all the marbles. And you could say, wow, that's built up all this excitement. I'm talking from a sporting standpoint, but also from a fan standpoint. They spoke by not showing up. We'll never know what the television numbers were because Apple doesn't release any of that. So we'll have no idea who is watching these games. But, I think it's and the other thing about the format is, they've had this issue before with the international break, but it's first and second rounds. There are teams that might go almost 3 weeks without playing a game because of the format. And because, somebody might sweep in 2 and then other series are going to the third and the whole thing. And, that seems you're already struggling with the international break anyway, keeping the interest. That's always been a discussion point, which was also solved last year. So they had it solved. And what you said at the very top, Roberto, Apple TV dictated this, MLS went along, and that's it, period.
Hey, money talks.
Yeah. So how about the games? The games themselves. Kevin Baxter, LA Times, also wrote a pretty good piece, along with Jonathan. I like hearing everybody's perspective. It's really and then some teams have a longer break in between the second the first and second game and the second and third game within all the teams in the playoffs. And that's not right either. So whatever. FC Cincinnati.
Go to Cupertino and solve this.
What's Cupertino?
Apple headquarters.
Oh, okay. I don't. Where is that? In LA?
It's closer to San Francisco, I believe.
Oh,
in
the
that
old
area.
In the valley. Okay.
No, the valley is in LA. No.
Oh.
That's where no. The valley is LA. Cupertino, California is near San Jose, San Francisco. It's that whole area, the Silicon Valley. When you say the valley, it means the one that's near LA. Silicon Valley is close together.
I was thinking Silicon Valley, and I couldn't think of the word silicone, but I'm glad it's there. Grateful Dead influence, and I'm sure that really plays a role in all the happenings. All right, let's get to some of these games. So Cincinnati beat the Red Bulls 3-0 at TQL. They didn't fill the place up, which is very rare there. What stood out to you in this game? Here's what we're gonna do. Each of us is gonna mention one thing that really stood out to us in each game.
I have a lot of things that stood out to me in this one, but fine. I'll give you one. Okay, Cincinnati scored first, and the Red Bulls haven't won any of their last 14 games when they give up the first goal.
Look at you pulling that out. That's beautiful. That's the best one, Roberto. That is really good. Good job. Now, I went for Serge Goma for the Red Bulls. Now, not a lot of people know about him because the poor kid came in. He's 18 years old. He was on the U15 national team earlier. He's a really dynamic player. And early on in his Red Bull career in 2022, when he was 17, he scored this late goal against Atlanta to give Red Bull the win. I happened to be watching the game. I was like, wow, who is this kid? Then he scores a goal against Austin at Austin. They win 4-3. And then shortly after that, this is near the tail end of the season. Then he gets a hamstring injury in 23 and misses the whole year until now. It was a hamstring. I contacted Mark Fishkin, who's the guy. He is Mr. Red Bull. And he said he confirmed it was a hamstring the whole year. Imagine that. That's a hell of a hamstring.
He probably got well trained and then re-injured it because there's no way that it takes that long. Well,
that may have happened. Anyway, he's back. He came in as a reserve in this game, and I think he's the kind of guy that could have an impact on their attack. I know they scored 5 in the wild card game, but this is not a high-scoring team. So that was my point. All right, Orlando 1, Nashville 0. What do you got there?
I have to go first in all of these?
Well,
let's see.
I'll go first on this one. Go first
on it. Go.
Our friend John Rojas sent a text to us at the end of the regular year, and it went something like this. Oscar Perea, who is the manager for Orlando, the cheapest roster in MLS. Cheapest. And second overall, the team international tournament for next year, players all over in the national teams along in their respective countries. But this is according to John, the experts, as he put it, are not ready for that conversation. That is the conversation that Perea is this outstanding coach. And so I thought I'd bring that up. That's pretty cool. Orlando right now, you wouldn't be out of your mind if you picked them to win MLS Cup. And
I think they're one of the two to three favorites for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the winner comes out of the East this year, and it's going to be either Orlando or Cincinnati. I think that those are far and away the two strongest teams. I don't see anybody in the West being able to win, although Seattle is peaking at the right time. But we're not talking about them yet.
I've got a dark horse in the West, but go ahead. What's your Orlando point?
Okay, no, it's not going to be Orlando. You took Orlando. I'll take it the other way. How did Nashville do this? I mean, how did Nashville manage to get themselves into this position? I mean, obviously they defend very well, but this is a team that, despite having Hani Mukhtar, has failed to score in 15 of their 35 games. That's almost half of their 35 games this season. Toronto, 18, and Colorado, 17 are the other teams that have done worse. I mean, not even New York City. And we've talked about the fact that New York City had problems scoring, and we didn't talk about the fact that this has been their worst season scoring ever. But that team with that fewer goals scored and being shut out almost half the time, and they're still in a position to continue to advance, and having a lethal striker like Hani Mukhtar.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. Mukhtar, still a good player, obviously, and I'm sure getting MVP votes, but it's not going to happen. Philadelphia 3, New England 1, Roberto. I'll go first again.
Go.
Daniel Gazdag, this penalty conversion thing is unbelievable. I've never heard of anything like this. It's like Rick Barry. Remember, he never missed a free throw. This guy never misses a penalty. He's 18 for 18 this year, all competitions. 25 for 25 in his Union career, all competitions. He scored 14 goals this year, 11 from the spot. And one final note, he has only failed to score once in 32 overall penalty kicks in his entire career professionally.
Okay, that's his club career. It's his club career because he missed a penalty for his national team this year. He scored one and missed one in a game for his national team, and he missed the second penalty kick he ever took, and that was in a Europa League game. He had actually scored the first one, and in the same game got a second one, and then he missed that one, and it was in a Europa game. I remember looking this up way back when. And then this year, he missed one during, I think it might have been the Euros. He actually did miss a penalty kick this year. And I was like shocked. And it may have been even in a shootout. I'm not really sure. The stats that you're mentioning are his club career. So I just wanted to make that small distinction. You're not wrong, but I just wanted to make that small distinction.
And not in shootouts either. These are just penalties.
Yeah.
It's incredible what
it's really automatic, except that he doesn't do it underhand like Rick Barry did, and so that should take away some brownie points.
And how about New England falling off the face of the earth since all this Bruce Arena stuff started and ended, and they have not been the same, despite the fact that Kurt Onalfo said we've got a bunch of pros here, these guys are going to get it done, and they really haven't. And if they get eliminated at home in the next match, I mean, they have time to recover and make it all right. But this is a team that has suffered by virtue of whatever happened with Arena and what he said in order to earn the wrath of not only the club, but the league, to be suspended. And now in order to get back, and we've heard the story that he's contacted DC United. That came from Pablo Maurer, who covers that area very closely for the Athletic. And but if DC United wants him, he's got to go through the commissioner's office, does Bruce Arena, in order to be reinstated. He has to reapply, or I don't know, go through. So I don't even know what exactly happens, but some sort of interview process.
It's a conversation. There's going to be a conversation, and we'll see how that goes. There's one thing that's really important. We're seeing a lot of these games that have really big score lines. It doesn't matter. It's just about wins. Goals.
Well, that's the other thing.
Difference.
I hate that.
Matter.
I don't like that either.
Matter.
LAFC beats Vancouver 5-2, and it's like, as someone wrote, it's like winning 1-0 on an own goal. It doesn't matter, and it
doesn't matter.
It's too bad. So you're at home. Now you got to go on the road. Best of 3, and now the goals don't even count. I mean, it's I don't like it. I don't like it. Seattle.
Right. Well, now that we're talking about that game, let's talk about how that game went, because it was a wild first half, and then LA in the second half, got the job done. And Dennis Bouanga has just been fantastic for them. He's got goals. He's contributed to goals in the last 4 games, and LA in their last 4 games have scored 15 goals. I mean, you talk about a team peaking as far as goal scoring is concerned. LAFC has done that, and there was a ton of empty seats in that game. And as you would mention, that was really weird. 3252 was fully populated and in full voice, as they always are. And to me, they add to the best atmosphere in MLS. They may not get the biggest crowds. You know, it's not Atlanta. It's not Charlotte. It's not Seattle. You know, but between them and Portland, they add the most fun to the game by their supporters. I mean, they're always in great voice. They have great songs. They're contagious. It's a great atmosphere.
Yeah, and we're on the same wavelength, even though it wasn't packed, but the supporters were. I think that's the place, and we've been to all these places, but we haven't been to Austin yet, so I can't speak for Austin.
I haven't been to LA. You went to, that was the season that English traveled and Spanish didn't.
Okay, so
because ESPN Deportes was cheap.
Okay.
It was.
The atmosphere there can really change a game like no other place. That's what I believe. You know, it's like that's where your team's down a goal. You know, there's 20 minutes left, and I'm not going to be surprised if it ends up 5-2. You know, and that's that. Although, it didn't happen quite that way, but I'm saying that's sort of the way I felt watching the game.
Yeah, but you get the feeling, but the facts sadly don't support that, because they've lost Champions League final at home. They lost Campeones Cup at home to Mexican teams. They had a chance to be able to win both of those tournaments, having that support, and they didn't get it done.
All right. Point well taken. St. Louis at home lost to Sporting KC 1-4. My point in that game, anytime I can make a New York City reference, Kyrie Shelton, former New York City winger, replaced Johnny Russell at the start of that game, you know, and was impactful. One of the two changes Peter Vermes made. Now, they had to play a midweek game. Johnny Russell's getting a little older. I don't know how much of that played a role. But Sporting KC, this is a team that did not win in any of their first 10 games. First 10 games of the year, they didn't have a victory. They got into the playoffs, and now they're on a roll, man. It's pretty cool.
So I've got a couple of stats for you, okay, on this. All right. And this sort of drove me crazy, because I was reading something, what was it, yesterday? I was reading a report on the game yesterday at MLS.com, and, you know, it's a great place to go and find out what's going on, okay? But I took exception to what they wrote, because on one hand, they wrote they didn't win in the first 10 games, fine. They had the best record in the West since May. And then they say this is a huge upset. No, it's not. You just told me why it's not a huge upset. You just told me that even though St. Louis City, which is a brand new team in this league, and yes, won the West, but didn't have the best record in the West since May. It was Sporting Kansas City. So how is that a huge upset? It's not a huge upset. I'm not saying it's an expected result, but it's not a huge upset, because it's not your normal 1 versus 8 matchup where the 8th team, you know, does it. There are reasons, okay? So Alan Pulido didn't play in the first 6 games, I believe, 5 or 6 games for them, because he was hurt. He's coming back from a long-term injury since 2021, okay? Didn't play at all in 2022, all right? And so once he came back, now the first game he started, they wound up losing to Colorado 1-0 at home. And so they were still going through a bad stretch, but he changed for them. He changed the game for them. And, you know, there was a lot of people talking about Pulido and what was he going to do, if it was going to be his last year in KC, if he was going to go to Guadalajara, because in Mexico they're reporting Guadalajara wants him, he wants to go to Guadalajara, etc. Meanwhile, we're reading here in the States how much he loves living in the States, because it's just so much different, and he really, really loves it. At the end of the day, he winds up signing a new extension for 3 years to stay in KC over the summer, and his salary was like $2.2 million. He's still a designated player. I don't think we know. I didn't read to see if his salary is still over $2.2 million, okay? But here's the thing with Alan Pulido and how important he is and how important a center forward can be, all right? Without Alan Pulido, Sporting Kansas City, which has had all sorts of trouble. We were talking about last year, right? Is Peter Vermees going to come back? And then we realized Peter Vermees is in a special situation. He almost owns that team. There's no way they're getting rid of him. But without Alan Pulido, they had a record of 20 wins, 28 losses, and 13 ties, and they scored 1.25 goals per game. With Alan Pulido, 28 wins, 16 losses, 12 ties, and they score 1.8 goals per game. All right? Yeah, that's the difference. That's the difference in KC. Alan Pulido was rock solid for them. He came in and he scored 14 goals, and he didn't even have a full season to do it. And one guy can actually change a team, and he was that guy. And that's why this is a much more even series than the 1 versus 8 narrative that we were getting. This is not an upset.
I expected to segue into New York City FC without a striker for a good portion of the season, and you were relating how important it is to have a number 9. I know you've been crying that all season, Roberto, and Monsef Bakrar came in, but as many midseason transfers do, it took him a while to acclimate, and we'll get a better look at Monsef Bakrar with a full preseason and see what he can do next year for New York City. Houston beat RSL 2-1. Let's just we'll go over this briefly. I thought there was a quote after the game from Artur, the Brazilian midfielder, who said, "We managed the pace of the game as to why they won the match." And a Ben Olsen team managing the pace of the game. I love the transformation of Ben Olsen as a coach with a team that can play in a manner where maybe he wanted to play all along at DC United, but they weren't I don't recall DC United teams under Ben Olsen managing the pace of the game necessarily, unless it was how they pressed and made the game a little faster. But Artur is saying we slowed it down, then we sped it up. Then we slowed it down, and then we sped it up. And that's why I said earlier, I have a dark horse to win the MLS Cup. It's this team, Houston. I think they might be playing as well as anybody right now in the league.
And they've got 2 of the better midfielders in this league, and they're both playing at a very high level with Hector Herrera, who, by the way, completed 129 passes in that game. You're talking about where does everything run through? It runs through Hector Herrera. And then Alberto Carrasquilla. He's not long for this league. He's going to go to Europe very, very soon, and he's got contributions for goals in the last 3 games. He really shown out for Panama when what was it, during Gold Cup, I think it was. He was really, really excellent, and he helped get them to the final. Remember in the game against the U.S., he was excellent, and he had been throughout that whole tournament, and since he's been back with Houston, he's been very, very good as well. As a matter of fact, even in the game that New York City lost to them 1-0 over there, Carrasquilla was a big man in that game. And so he's been excellent, and I really think that Europe will come a-calling for him very, very soon.
I guess Artur should adjust his quote that Hector Herrera managed the pace of the game with 129 completed.
That's amazing.
Passes. Huh?
That's amazing.
It is. All right, just a couple other things, Roberto. And we're into overtime or added time, but or extra time, depending on what type of the year it is. We don't have extra time. There is no extra time in the MLS Cup playoffs, of course. Best 2 out of 3, they go right to penalties. So that's another thing I don't like, just for the record. But
that's only for this round. I have no.
I know. I don't. That doesn't mean I like it.
Next rounds they are 1-game knockouts. So after that, I presume we're going back to extra time and penalties.
Messi wins his 8th Ballon d'Or, and certainly Argentina winning the World Cup, I think that played a significant role, considering what Erling Haaland did in 2023. I mean, my goodness, he really, in some ways, did more than Messi individually, but I think that World Cup put Messi over the top. And then speaking of World Cup, Roberto, 2000.
You don't think it was the League's Cup win? I was like balancing that.
I think it was the U.S.
Probably League's Cup was the one that really said, all right, fine, we got to give it to him.
No, I think it was the U.S. Open Cup semifinal victory that actually got him over the top. Although we'll never see that on the Apple documentary. We'll never see it, but that's what got him the Ballon d'Or. World Cup 2034, Saudi Arabia. It's 11 years before this thing even. Rob Harris, I don't know how much you read him, but I really respect him. I think you should follow him, everybody. This is an article he wrote in early October, but it gives you the gist of things. FIFA just put in this short-term opportunity to apply for the 2034 World Cup. Unprecedented how they've gone about this. And they did it, according to Rob Harris and many, with the purpose so that Saudi Arabia, the kingdom, as he puts it, would handily win this, because Australia was really the only other group that had a chance to maybe come up with a bid, and they've dropped it. Today they dropped it. They're not going to bid. There's only one country bidding. It's Saudi Arabia. Typically countries, it is according to Rob, typically countries are given a long period to consider bids, which require vast planning, especially since the men's tournament was expanded to 48 teams from 32. And he being Rob, suggests that this is very much a Gianni Infantino driven moment, because his relationship
Really?
with the Saudis are very close.
I'm
And
so shocked.
and how did he put it here? Africa, Europe, and South America were knocked out of competition for this by a behind-the-scenes deal with FIFA, what they did in 2030, because 6 countries are going to host the World Cup in 2030. We've read about that.
Well, saying 6 is really pushing it, considering there's going to be one game apiece in
It's not pushing it.
Uruguay, Argentina, and what? Paraguay was the
It's
third
true.
one?
Yeah, but it's not pushing it because the fact that one game in each country is going to be played in 2030, South America was taken out of the mix for 2034. A complete construction to guide it towards Saudi Arabia. I believe that too. But I mean, I don't know as much as Rob Harris, who has studied it intently along with other journalists. It's something to go out and Google and see. Make your own opinion by reading all the different accounts, including FIFA's, what they have to say about it. But it seems to me that, and here's the best part, Roberto. 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup. They still don't know where it's going to be, but they know where the 2034 Men's World Cup is going to be. Case closed.
You know that they arrange these things. I mean, we saw what happened with Qatar.
But they deny it. Why deny it? Why not just say this is where we want to put it? And then we'd all shut up. Now we have to speculate.
I mean, it's absurd that 2030 isn't being played in South America with Uruguay hosting most of the games, because that's what they should have done.
Well, the initial thought is that, well, they threw Uruguay a bone, and they're going to do this and this, and
they hosted the first World Cup.
I know.
In 1930.
I get it.
They should have gotten it again 100 years later, not just we'll throw you a bone. You get one bloody game at home, and then you got to travel 10 hours to join the rest of the tournament.
That's great, isn't it? Oh, God. They threw him a bone so they could get Saudi Arabia locked into 2034. It's really it's a sad statement.
And here's what FIFA should have done. Okay, now you got me political. This is what FIFA should have done. Okay, Saudi Arabia has been trying, between golf, opening up their soccer league, and paying gazillions of dollars to all these players, and now wanting the World Cup. Okay, they're doing this to try to sanitize their image around the world and give a different perspective of who they are and all that. You want to change that? You want to change that? Give people in your country equal rights. Women equal rights, gays equal rights, immigrants equal rights. Do that. And FIFA, being who they are, should have said, you know what? We're going to give you the 2034 World Cup without a bid. We'll give it to you under the condition that you do that. And if you don't do that, then you don't get it, because they have the power to do it, and they didn't do it, and they should have done it. And let Saudi Arabia say, we're not going to do it then. If you give us conditions and we have to give people equal rights, then we're not going to do it. They should have done it. And shame on them for not having done that.
Plus,
shame on them.
Plus, Saudi Arabia is breaching FIFA requirements to not discriminate against gay people, which originated in Qatar, and the fallout there, the anti-LGBTQ laws. So there's a FIFA requirement, and here's what the Saudi sports minister said. And again, this is back in the Sky News article. He said they, meaning gays or LGBTQ community, they are welcome. I'm sure they've come to some of our events. We don't go around asking, are you gay or straight? Everyone's welcome. There are rules that everyone respects. So then you ask, what are the rules? Rules that everyone respects at our culture and how they have to abide by the culture that we have. So what do you think of that?
Don't hold hands. Don't smile at each other. I mean,
Yeah.
What are you going to do? God almighty.
But they're claiming that if it's a man and a woman, they can't do those things either in public.
Well, there's that as well. Look,
I'm
not. You had an opportunity,
defending
FIFA,
them.
to make the world a better place. You
Yeah.
had an opportunity to make the world a better place, and you punted. And that's what you did for money.
And I used the word sports watching a little earlier when you were on your rampage there, but that's what you're saying, right? That's what you were saying.
As far as?
Well, sports watching is using sports to improve your image, despite the fact that you still have.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that's the whole reason. Absolutely.
Well, there'd be some debate there too, probably. I'm not debating you. I'm just saying, that's not in line with what the ministers of that country would say. That's all. But I think it's look. I know that it impacted part of my family, Qatar, because we have gay married couples in my family, and they wouldn't watch 1 second of the World Cup in Qatar because of, and it was just out of support for their own rights, but just because they wouldn't support anything where a major event like that would be in a country like that. And the fact that these things are permitted is all about money, and it always comes back to that, doesn't it, Roberto?
Well, look, our good friend and Grant Wall, made a point in Qatar and with the shirt that he was wearing, and they gave him all sorts of problems for that.
Yeah. No question. I took a picture of me and Grant. We sat together at a lot of games after he came upstairs late with that shirt on, and he told me the story at the time. And he actually said, they ended up being cooperative at the end. At first it was whatever, and then he said they were almost nice at the end to let him in, because they were trying to be on their best behavior. Everybody involved in that tournament. I was there. It was. You never felt unsafe. I didn't. I'm a white guy.
I'm sure you didn't.
Just walking around, and I just, it was they did their part there. I thought, although there were some women journalists who struggled a little bit getting past security a couple of times, more so than there were a couple of stories told there that were not very pleasant. So, some call that culture, others would call that something else. All right. Well, look,
we'll leave it at that.
But good show. Lots happened this week, even though New York City was eliminated from playoff consideration. If you're just at the tail end of this and you didn't hear the beginning, we're talking about the roster move.
It's not live, Glenn.
We're talking about
it's technical
not live. Staff.
They have to start at the beginning, most likely.
Yeah, but they might be distracted if it's in their car. If it's in their car and somebody calls, and you just go back and listen. All right, I did too much live stuff.
Glenn. That's the way technology works. It pauses, doesn't continue to go.
All right. Anyway, We talk about a lot of good. Go back and listen again in case you didn't remember everything we said. How's that, Roberto? Is that okay?
All right, fine. If you have my memory, you can do that.
All right. For Roberto Abramowitz, I'm Glenn Crooks. Till next time on NYCFC Views.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast NYCFC Views on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.